Well, we've got by now a really nice cluster of little boxes here, mechanisms to make. And although it may look a little bit daunting, I think if you've got this far, you're really more than up to the challenge of making this. In fact, you've done the hard bit. I think this is the fun bit, putting it all together. So there's a few additional elements that were all on that page, which you will have cut out, a few squares here and some washers and other parts to glue, which by now are starting to look familiar. So what we need to do is just separate these out a little bit. And if I can just bring in these objects here. Now what we're going to do, we're making this slightly differently because it's not because the mechanism is difficult, but it'll be quite fiddly to put all of this together inside that box, because the box of the owl body is quite small. So I thought it's better to do it this way. And you can copy this for the frog if you want this method, although to be honest the frog box is much larger and easier to work on. So to start off with, we're just going to construct this. Now the first thing to do is to put one shaft onto here, so some glue not quite up to the grey box, and then match that with a little bit on the longer of the two just straight squares that we've got, and that's just going to sit onto there like so. Again, keep that nice and square, line everything up, bit of pressure on it while it dries, and just let that offset. It's important that that dries nicely and that we keep that nice and square as possible, and obviously as strong as possible as well. Now I'm just going to move that up just so it's nearly touching the box there. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that for a few minutes, just pop it on the side so you can see what it looks like there, and then we've got the next one to put on, which is going to look like that. So then we'll pop that one on as well. But first of all, let's just give that a few moments to dry. Okay, that's setting nicely, so what we're going to do is build up the mechanism. Now we've got these washers here, and they're just going to build up, just slide it on next to the box there. It's just to help smooth the passage of the box here. So we've now got, we'll put this on its side, we've got that stick stuck on, we've got our washer, then we're going to pop the next part to slide on will be this, with the actual square itself. Then another washer on that side, and then finally we're going to put that box on there like so and glue that. Okay, so that's the part I'm going to do next. Just rest that on its side, a little bit of glue onto there. What we don't want is this mechanism to glue up, and then about halfway on that other box there, because again that's going to have to sit separately from there. And I'm going to tip it on its side, just move it a little bit closer and allow a little bit of free play on there, squeeze it down, and that should be able to move left and right just a little bit, if I can show you there, but not too much because we're trying to control that as well. It's just what I call kissing it. And there we go. So we'll just let that all offset now and dry nicely like so. Okay, so if I just pop that on the side, you can see how that's now looking, and then just again tip it all the way up, and you can see what our mechanism's like here at the moment. Righty ho, it's time again just to leave that to do its thing. We've got to let that dry, and while that's drying, if I can just pull into shot, the next part we're going to put on is actually this part that goes onto the top of that square there, and that's simply going to sit like that. But before I manhandle this too much, as I said, I'll just let this offset and dry itself. That's now drying nicely, so what we can do just before we go any further, there's some little side panels that add to the strength. Now these are great because they stop it from actually sort of breaking apart. You'll see there were 4 of those, and I'm just going to put those on and glue them, one on one side, one on the other there. You'll notice as well that our washers come in handy because they're stopping, as you can see, the glue from actually touching this part that slides. It's really got to be free to move. Again, If I just squeeze that on and do the same again for those two sides as well. So those are the side panels on, the mechanism's all drying nicely. One little thing you can do now to help it on its way when it's going to be fully functional is to get yourself an ordinary pencil and just rub the graphite, draw along the edges all around the box here. This sort of acts as a lubricant and it helps that little mechanism slide along as well. It's like oil for card, I like to think of it. And so just work your way around, and any little rough spots of glue will actually just come off as well. It's a great way of just helping things on their way. Okay, now what you can also do as well, I've put this together and it's not wildly necessary, but if I can just pull this back, imagine that's the shaft and you've got your grey bit on the top there. You could actually just take your pencil and just rub a little bit along those edges as well. And in fact, while we've got this bit, this is going to slide in and out, so it wouldn't harm just to do the same on here. This is, as I said, it acts like oil, and what I'll do is just put that on. So it's just an ordinary pencil lead. It's graphite, but it's incredibly slippery stuff, and that will just help the shaft to slide up and down within the mechanism as well, so that's not a bad thing. But I said, imagine that was the drive shaft there and that was the grey square. You could add some on just the corners as well. It's just belt and braces. Shouldn't need it. Putting it around the box there should be absolutely fine for you. Okay, so that's all dry and doing what it should. So we've got the box there, and if I just put that up that way. Now the main handle is going to be coming out there. This is going to be the top of the mechanism, and so there's a little grey box. It's probably hard to make out. That's right in the middle, so we can line that up there, and that's simply now going to stick like so on there, if I can show you, and that's that part there for us. Okay, so as ever with our trusty glue, these tabs here will just need a lot of glue on them. By a lot, I mean we're gluing this nice and firmly. And then some onto here as well, just to help it all stick, because this really is under a lot of pressure when this mechanism's working. It's got a lot of work to do. Hold that down, and we want to keep that, it should, because it's all square and there's box shapes, should all just square up as it dries as well. There's a little bit of movement in here, and that just sort of helps it take out the fact that it's a bit more forgiving as such if things don't quite go according to plan. And let's face it, these are, you know, there's a lot of working on out and cutting and gluing here, and not everything's going to be 100% precise, and this is great fun. Kids enjoy this, and they might not be quite that accurate. The nice thing is that it is what I call quite forgiving. Okay, so we've got those drying there, that's important, and we've got two other little tabs I can show you here, and we'll just pull that mechanism to one side, and I just show you here, whoops, just move that out, they're just going to help add a little bit of extra support. Just pick that up. If I move that mechanism to one side, these little tabs here just help to give a little bit more support just along the side here as well. So just squeeze that down and just hold those there. Now this is going to be moving backwards and forwards, so that's why we've got to make sure there's a little bit of free play. Let me just let that dry. And I'll go on and do the same for the other side as well. There we go. But that's why the washers just help to clear everything there. And when that's done and it's all dried, I'll put a little bit of pencil on that as well, just to help this all slide along. So it won't really show up that much. If I can, just show you here now, just a little bit of pencil will help this mechanism just slide backwards and forwards. Okay, so I'll let that dry, and I'll go on and do one on the other side now as well. And then we'll come back and we'll assemble this into the box. We're ready to assemble this all together. So here's our mechanism here. This is a little, what I call the mechanism test. Just swing it around, make sure that that's free to move, because before we put that in, if there's any problems, Now's our time to find out. Okay, here's the box, our old friend the box that we prepared earlier on, and what we're going to do now is just work out how to put all this in. As you can see, we've left the box pretty well open. If we have the centre here with the square hole, this main tube is going to run through it, and those two side shafts are going to go in there. So it's a case now, just tip that up there and then put that through. Now before we do that, you'll notice that there were two end panels that we had here with holes on. Now is the time to stick those on. Now these act as an extra little bearing to just protect that hole there, if you can see. So when the handle's turning, it gives a little bit of support. So what I'm going to do is just put these two panels on, and then we'll offer this all up. That's going to just help support the mechanism a little bit more as you twist the handle, so you put some strain on the side of the box. So let's lift that up. The square part's going into there, and then we're just going to pull these two sides up. 1, 2 for our mechanism here. If I can just show you, that will just slot through. I just centre that up, and then we're going to just construct the box as we would normally. So you can just go a side at a time, and then I've glued a strip here and one in there, and I'll just hold that in, and that just holds the mechanism in like so. And so I'm going to go on now, let that dry properly, and just work my way round. Those two will slot into there like that, that down onto there, and that into there like so. And then I'll have the box with the mechanism in, working like so. Okay, so you need to just go on now and glue your box together. Well, that's the box all glued up, and who can resist just having a little turn of the handle now? You can see the mechanism rising and falling. So a few little extra elements to put on there. We've got the side washer here, you can see that. So some glue onto the inner tabs there only, because we don't want to glue this mechanism so that it stops working, i.e. if you get that sticking onto the main shaft, we're going to have a few problems. So using my stick here, I'm just going to, let me just show you, put a little bit of glue onto there, and that should now just slide over like so. And I'm just lining up the mechanism, making sure I'm not, you can push the sides in, and that might go a little bit too far, so just make sure it's somewhere where it's happy to be, and then just squeeze that and let those dry, and that'll just hold it nicely in position on the end there. It's really just belt and braces, because in a way the mechanism is being held by the sides in there, but it's an important part to add on. That just helps keep it in position. Okay, we've got our crank handle as well to go on, so we've just slip a washer into there. That'll just help protect it as it spins round, and then some glue on the inside part of the crank and onto there. We want to glue this nicely because it's under a lot of pressure, so a little bit of glue, and then that will just slide on. In fact, you know what, if you just put some around this part as well, that'll just help stick. It's all got to help, hasn't it, really, whatever we put on there. And just slide that on into position and squeeze that in as well. And make sure that really does glue nicely and sets firmly. This again is under a lot of pressure when it's working and turning the mechanism, so it's worth gluing properly. And by properly, I mean just really having enough glue on there. I don't think you can have too much when it comes to something like this, because it will all just add, if there is too much, it'll just sort of ooze out as you squeeze it, but it's better that than not being enough. Okay, so we're going to leave that to dry, and while that's drying, the next thing to add will be this little bit here. This is going to house our mechanism that'll slide up and down. So if you've got a pencil handy, again, you could just put a little bit of pencil lead just into there. This is just going to lubricate that shaft a little bit as it moves in and out. Doesn't need much, it'll just slowly spread around, so I just draw a few lines in. It's just, as I said, it's oil for card is the way of thinking about that. Okay, so we're not going to put the handle under any pressure just yet. set your model up right, and then these parts come out like so, and that is simply going to slot over there and glue down with those 4 tabs like so. Now I'm going to put the glue on the base so I don't spread any glue on the mechanism as I slide it down. And with my stick here, let's just tip that to one side for you. You can see, just add that there. This is all going to be covered by the owl's body, so don't be afraid. This is again what I call a load bearing part. So flooding you with technical terms there, but it's not going to show. So let's really go to town with the glue here. Okay, that slots over like so, squares up and sits down there. Now what we're trying to do is just line that up so we're not putting any pressure. Can you see? It's a little bit of jiggery pokery. Let the mechanism move a little bit. It'll force its way where it wants to go then, but you're just squaring that up nicely there. Then let it set, because it will try and push it out the way slightly anyway. Okay, and that should really be us set there. It's as long as that's free to move, and that feels like it is. I'll just put a little bit of pressure onto that and keep that held down so we can see there that that's the sleeve, and that just keeps everything moving nice and straight for us, like so. I love that bit. I love turning the handle on the mechanism. I think that's really the fun part. But I've got to let that dry first. I'm running ahead of myself. Now that's all nice and dry, so you can have a little play with the mechanism now. Sorry, I just find these such good fun. So there we go. It should all move nice and smoothly like this now. Remember, we've made it all out of card, so there's going to be a little bit of play, but look, up and down the stick's rising. That's great, because that's going to power the owl's wings up and down and his head. So that's the next thing to look at now. We'll go and look at the body and then the assembly of that to here and how we make the mechanisms all join up.